Dear friend, I'd like to invite you to sit with me for a moment, right here in the quiet of the garden. Imagine it's a soft morning, the kind where the air's cool enough to make a warm cup of tea feel like comfort in your hands. The birds are stirring, the dew still lingers on the grass, and the world feels slower, more forgiving. Out here, surrounded by plants and old memories, we're reminded that beauty doesn't ask for much, just a little patience, a touch of imagination, and a willingness to see possibility in the ordinary. You don't need a big budget or even boundless energy to shape your backyard into a place of wonder. Sometimes the smallest projects bring the greatest pride. An old frame turned into a living picture, a few boards charred into something striking and timeless, or even moss painted onto stone so it grows into art over time. These projects don't ask you to lift more than you can, or to spend more than you'd like. They only ask for your care. Today I'll share with you 10 simple, beautiful DIY projects that can transform a backyard into a sanctuary. Each one can be started right away, many for just a handful of dollars. Think of it as an afternoon of creativity, one where your hands and heart work together to give old things new life. As we go along, I hope you'll find not just ideas, but encouragement, the reminder that no matter our age, our gardens, like our lives, can bloom with fresh chapters. Have you ever noticed how some of the most stunning things in life come from simple, even rough beginnings? Think of an old tree struck by lightning, its bark blackened yet somehow more majestic afterward. That same idea is what lies behind an ancient Japanese technique called wood charring. It's a process where ordinary boards of pine or cedar are carefully touched with flame, their surface darkened into a deep velvety black that looks like it belongs in a designer catalog. But here's the surprise: it can be done right in your backyard with little cost and a lot of heart. To try it, you don't need much more than a simple torch, a wire brush, and linseed oil. The fire gently burns the surface, sealing and protecting it at the same time. Once the loose char is brushed away, a light oil brings out a sheen that looks more expensive than it has any right to. No staining, no painting, just the work of fire and time. And the best part, this wood lasts longer than untreated boards, resisting weather and wear with quiet strength. I once visited a neighbor who had used this method to make simple planter boxes. They sat against a fence, their jet black finish a dramatic backdrop for her bright marigolds and cheerful petunias. I'll never forget how the contrast made every color pop, as if the flowers had been framed in fine art. She told me with a laugh that visitors often asked what boutique shop she had bought them from, never imagining they were the result of a Saturday afternoon experiment. This project isn't just about wood, it's about transformation. Taking something plain and giving it dignity, making it not only useful, but beautiful. In that way, it mirrors our own journey as we age. We too carry marks of time and weather, but with a little care, those very marks become what makes us striking and unforgettable. Do you remember those old stone troughs you might have seen on farms or in historic gardens, weathered and softened by moss, looking as if they'd stood for centuries? Imagine being able to create that same timeless look, but with materials so light and inexpensive that you can move them around your garden without strain. That's the magic of hypertufa, a simple blend of peat moss, perlite, and cement that turns into what looks and feels like aged stone. Making hypertufa planters is less complicated than it sounds. You mix the ingredients until they are about the texture of bread dough, then press them into a mold. Something as ordinary as a cardboard box or a plastic container will do. Before the mixture hardens, you poke a hole for drainage, then let it cure slowly for about a week. Over time, the surface softens, grows character, and even invites moss to settle in. So what begins as a new project soon looks like an heirloom piece discovered in a forgotten corner of Europe. I knew a woman named Ruth who lived in a small apartment with only a modest balcony. She wanted something grand, something that gave her a sense of permanence and beauty, but she couldn't manage heavy stone planters or afford expensive pottery. So she made her own hypertufa troughs. I still remember stepping onto her balcony. She had arranged them with cascading ivy, tiny alpine flowers, and even miniature evergreens. The effect was so charming that neighbors began asking if she had them imported. She'd just smile and say, "No, just a little kitchen mess and patience." That's the gift of hypertufa. It makes beauty accessible. It reminds us that even in small spaces, even with limited means, we can create something that feels lasting and noble. The weather will only improve them, adding age and character with every season. And isn't that a comforting thought, that with time, rather than losing value, something can grow richer, more storied, more beloved, just like us? Think for a moment about the walls of your home. How many of them hold photographs, paintings, or memories framed behind glass? Now imagine taking that same idea outdoors, but instead of paper or canvas, the frame itself becomes alive. That's the joy of creating a living, succulent frame, a piece of art that grows and changes with the seasons, a painting that never quite stays the same. The process is beautifully simple. You start with a deep picture frame, something you might find at a thrift store or tucked away in storage. Remove the glass and back it with chicken wire. Behind that line, the space with landscaping fabric, then add a shallow layer of soil designed for succulents. From there, you tuck in tiny rosettes, spiky textures, and trailing bits of greenery, pushing them gently through the wire so they hold snug. For a few weeks, you'll keep the frame flat, letting the roots settle in before hanging it on a fence or wall where it can be admired. A dear friend of mine tried this one summer using an old family frame that once held her grandmother's portrait. She carefully planted small hens and chick succulents in swirling patterns, almost like brushstrokes of paint. When it was ready to hang, she placed it on the fence just beyond her porch swing. Every time I visited, I noticed something new, the way a trailing variety had begun to spill over the corner, or how the colors shifted subtly with the changing light. She told me it felt like her garden had its own gallery, and that the piece carried both her grandmother's memory and her own new creation. What I love about these living frames is how they remind us that art doesn't need to be static. It can be something that grows with us, evolves, surprises, and even teaches us patience. And because succulents are hardy and low maintenance, this project welcomes even those of us who no longer have the strength for constant watering or heavy lifting. It's art, it's gardening, and it's memory, all in one small, beautiful frame. Close your eyes and think back to childhood. Do you remember hiding in forts made of blankets, or crouching beneath a tree's low branches to create a secret world of your own? That same sense of wonder can live again in the garden through the magic of woven willow. With just a few flexible young branches called willow whips, you can weave tunnels, domes, and fences that don't just stand still. They grow leaf and change with every season. The process is gentler than it sounds. In late winter or early spring, when the ground is soft, you simply press the willow whips into moist soil. Arrange them in arcs for a tunnel, in circles for a dome, or in rows for a fence. Then, while they're still supple, weave horizontal branches in and out like a basket. Within weeks, the willow takes root, and soon you have not just a structure, but a living, breathing sculpture. I once visited a community garden where volunteers built a willow dome for children. In spring, it was a simple frame of slender sticks. By summer, it had transformed into a lush green hideaway with leaves rustling overhead like whispered secrets. The children loved to crawl inside, playing house or reading quietly in the dappled shade. As the years passed, the structure grew sturdier, its branches thickening its presence more magical. It was no longer just a craft, it had become part of the garden's heartbeat. What makes willow sculptures so special is their ability to change with time. They are green and fresh in spring, cool and shady in summer, golden in fall, and sculptural in winter's bare light. Unlike lifeless fences, these creations evolve as you do, and they remind us of something: tender growth doesn't have to stop with age. With a little weaving, a little care, beauty continues to take root, stretching, bending, and becoming more wondrous each passing year. Have you ever knelt down in your garden and noticed how the soil changes color just a few inches apart? A patch of red clay here, a band of sandy brown there, maybe even streaks of dark, rich loam. Most of us don't think of dirt as beautiful, but when layered together, It can become art and even structure. That's the spirit of rammed earth walls, an ancient building method that turns ordinary soil into striking, striped creations. The process is steady and rhythmic. You build a simple form out of plywood about as wide as a bread loaf and begin layering soil in different shades. Each layer is tamped down firmly until it hardens into a band of color. When the forms are removed, what's left behind looks almost like sandstone cliffs, a natural artwork shaped by your own hands. These walls can be used as raised garden beds, low seating, or decorative dividers that blend perfectly into the landscape. I once met a couple who built rammed earth planters along their patio. They didn't buy special soil. Instead, they simply used what was already on their land, mixing in bits of clay from one corner and darker earth from another. The result was a patchwork of their property's history, each layer telling a story of the place they called home. When their grandchildren visited, they loved to run their hands along the walls, tracing the stripes like pages in a book. What's so comforting about this project is its humility. You aren't buying stone or concrete, you're shaping what you already have. It's a reminder that beauty doesn't always come from somewhere else. Sometimes it's beneath your feet waiting to be honored. These walls, strong and permanent, are proof that even the most overlooked things like soil can hold unexpected grace. And as gardeners, isn't that our gift, to see worth where others see nothing special and to bring out beauty hidden in plain sight? Have you ever walked through a garden at dusk when the sun has just slipped below the horizon and the air hums with that soft blue light? It's the perfect moment for a little magic. And that's where glowing gabion sculptures come in. A gabion is simply a wire basket filled with stone, glass, or other materials. But when you place a light source inside, it transforms from something sturdy and practical into a lantern-like jewel glowing with warmth and wonder. The idea is simple, but the results feel almost enchanted. You start with a mesh basket, which can be purchased or even made with strong wire. Then you fill it with what you have: river rocks, bits of recycled glass bottles, seashells, even broken ceramic pieces. Before finishing the fill, tuck a waterproof solar light or LED rope inside. When the sun goes down, the sculpture begins to shine, the light bouncing and scattering through the stones and glass like fireflies caught in amber. I once attended a neighborhood gathering where the host had lined her garden path with these glowing towers. During the day, they looked artistic enough, layers of stone and glass creating patterns. But when night fell, the whole garden seemed to awaken. Guests paused by each one, marveling at the soft glow spilling through the cracks. Some even began sharing stories about campfires, childhood lanterns, and summer nights gone by. It wasn't just decoration, it became the heart of the evening, sparking connection and memory. That's the beauty of this project. It gives you both day and night artistry. In the morning, they're textured sculptures. At night, they're glowing companions, and all from materials you might already have lying around. It's proof that light doesn't have to be grand to be powerful. A humble basket, a handful of rocks, and a little creativity can turn darkness into something warm and welcoming. Sometimes that's all a garden needs, a touch of light to remind us that beauty shines brightest when the world is quiet. Think back to childhood when mud pies and sandcastles felt like works of art. There's something grounding about shaping earth with your hands, molding it into something that didn't exist before. That same joy can live on in your garden today through cob benches, seating made from clay, soil, sand, and straw. It's a technique as old as human settlement itself, yet it feels fresh and extraordinary when used in a backyard. The process is like baking bread with the earth. You mix the soil, sand, and straw with water until it's soft and pliable. Then, layer by layer, you build up the form of a bench, a curved wall, or even a chair. As it dries, it hardens into a surface as sturdy as stone, yet shaped by your imagination. You can leave it rustic, smooth it with plaster, or even press bits of tile glass or shells into it for decoration. A cushion on top makes it both inviting and practical. I once visited a small retreat center where the caretaker had sculpted a winding cob bench that curved like a snake along the garden's edge. Embedded in its sides were colorful pieces of broken pottery, each one carrying a story from visitors who had stayed there. On cool evenings, the bench held warmth from the day's sun, offering a cozy seat as the air turned crisp. Sitting there, you felt connected not just to the garden, but to the very earth beneath your feet. What I find so moving about this project is its reminder that creation doesn't stop with age. Even hands that may have slowed can still shape something lasting, something that carries both function and beauty. A cob bench is more than a place to sit. It's a testament to patience, creativity, and the quiet power of making something out of nothing. And each time you rest there, you'll be reminded that what we shape with care becomes part of the story of our home. Close your eyes and imagine the sound of water in a garden, the gentle trickle over stone, the soft splash into a basin, that calming rhythm that makes you breathe slower. A water feature has a way of changing a space, turning it into a sanctuary. But many people think such features are too costly or heavy to manage. That's where Ferocement comes in, a technique that lets you sculpt fountains, bowls, and flowing shapes from thin layers of cement over simple wire frames. The process begins with something as humble as chicken wire, bent into the outline of your chosen form. It could be a low basin, a tall, abstract tower, or even a playful creature that spits water like in an old European square. Over that wire, you spread a mix of cement reinforced with fibers, building it up in layers until it's strong and watertight. Add a small pump, and suddenly you have a custom fountain no store could sell. The beauty of this technique is freedom. You aren't limited by what's on the shelf. You can create exactly what your imagination shows you. I once knew a man who built a water feature for his wife's rose garden using this method. He shaped it like a simple bowl perched on a pedestal, with water flowing gently over the edges. It wasn't grand, but the sound filled their backyard with peace. She told me it became her favorite spot to sip morning coffee, saying the water seemed to wash the noise from her mind. What touched me most was that it wasn't bought. It was made a gift shaped by his own hands, carrying love in every ripple. This project reminds us that beauty doesn't have to be purchased whole. Sometimes it comes from letting our hands and hearts do the shaping. Water features built this way don't just decorate. They invite reflection, soften hard days, and remind us that flow and renewal are always possible no matter our age. Privacy in a garden doesn't have to come from tall fences or expensive panels. Sometimes the most charming solution is the simplest one-woven branches laced together into rustic screens. This ancient craft, known as wattle or hurdle weaving, was once common across the countryside of Europe. Farmers used it to build fences, pens, and even walls. Today, it can bring a touch of that handmade timeless beauty into your backyard. The process is gentle, almost like knitting with nature. You start with sturdy stakes driven into the ground in a row. Then, using flexible branches like willow dogwood or even grapevine, you weave them in and out, over and under, pressing each row down snug before adding the next. Slowly, a pattern emerges, textured, organic, and warm. The finished screen can stand as a divider between areas of the yard, a backdrop for flowers, or even a portable panel you can move as the garden changes. A neighbor of mine once used this technique to create a small private corner where she could read outdoors. She didn't have the means for a tall fence, but each spring she pruned her grapevines and saved the branches. By weaving them together, she built her own natural walls. When I visited, I noticed how the light filtered through the woven gaps, creating soft stripes on the ground. It wasn't a closed-off space, it was a gentle boundary one that whispered privacy without shutting out the world. What I love most about wattle screens is how they embrace imperfection. No two branches are alike, no two screens identical. They remind us that beauty doesn't come from uniformity, it comes from the hands that shape it, the patience in the weaving and the willingness to see art in crooked twigs. These screens may not last forever, but while they stand, they hold a certain grace, teaching us that even the simplest materials, when cared for, can create spaces of peace and belonging. Picture this: a quiet stone wall at the edge of your garden, bare and ordinary. Now imagine that same wall slowly coming alive with green letters, shapes, or swirls of moss that you painted yourself. This is moss graffiti, one of the most whimsical and enchanting DIY projects you can try. It turns old, forgotten surfaces into living artwork, growing and changing with the seasons. The method feels almost like cooking. You blend a mixture of moss buttermilk water and a little sugar until it becomes a thick paint. With a brush or sponge, you apply it onto porous surfaces, brick stones, even wooden boards. At first, it looks like nothing more than a smear. But give it a few weeks of light misting, and the moss begins to take hold, sprouting into soft, velvety patterns. Over time, your design grows lush and deep, becoming part of the garden itself. I once saw a grandmother create a moss heart on her old shed, carefully brushing it onto the boards. By midsummer, the shape was unmistakable, a bright green heart pulsing against the gray wood. Her grandchildren loved to run their hands across it, marveling that Grandma painted with plants. She told me it gave her shed and her days a little more life. It was as if the wall itself had learned to smile. What's beautiful about moss graffiti is that it thrives on patience. It doesn't appear overnight. It grows slowly, softening hard surfaces and rewarding you for the care you give. In a way, it teaches the same lesson as the garden itself, that growth, though sometimes invisible at first, always comes with time. And when it does, it transforms the plain into the unforgettable, reminding us that life has a way of writing its own poetry, if we just give it space to grow. And so, dear friend, we come to the end of our walk through these 10 simple yet extraordinary backyard projects. Each one, whether it's charred wood, glowing baskets, or a wall painted with moss, carries the same message: beauty doesn't have to be expensive, complicated, or out of reach. What it truly asks for is imagination, a gentle touch, and the courage to begin. I think of these projects as metaphors for life itself. Just as hypertufa grows richer with age, so do we. Just as willow sculptures take root and grow stronger each season, so too can our spirits. And just as cob benches are shaped slowly by hand, we are shaped by patience, care, and time. These projects aren't just about decorating a backyard. They're about reminding ourselves that creation is still within our grasp, no matter our years or limitations. Perhaps one idea today spoke to you more than the others. Maybe you can already picture a living succulent frame brightening your fence, or a soft glow from a gabion basket guiding you along a garden path. The project you choose doesn't need to be perfect. What matters is the joy of trying, the sense of pride when you step back and see something you've made with your own hands. So I invite you to ask yourself, which idea brought you joy? Which one made your heart whisper? I could do that. Let that be the seed you plant today. Gather the materials, take your time, and let the process be as meaningful as the result. And if you'd like to keep finding inspiration, join me here again, because there are always more gentle, creative ways to make life and garden richer. Until next time, may your hands continue to shape beauty. May your garden continue to bloom with imagination, and may your days be filled with the quiet pride of creating something truly your own. Happy gardening, dear friend.